You're listening to the No Such Thing podcast.
We have Troy Hudson of the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Research Organization. I'm really glad you could come on the show. It's a real pleasure to have you. Thanks very much.
Well, appreciate it, and thank you for the invitation.
Now, you're based out of southeast Oklahoma, aren't you, where Dave and Mark and stuff is?
Yes.
And I was referred to you by Mark. He was telling me that you're very credible and you come out to look at his property and stuff. And I've already introduced you in the intro video, as you know.
Yeah.
So where do we start? Let's what do you do actually at the minute? You work in decontamination of some sort. Can you explain that a little bit?
No, actually, I'm in the emergency management field, dealing with disasters, predominantly involved in, hospital emergency management, EMS, fire, police, and basically during this COVID incident, what's going on is I'm assigned to about 2 or 3 different types of projects going on. I'm overseeing, coordinating, and monitoring different projects from the state level down to the local level. So you could say I'm wearing about 4 different hats right now.
Right now, I saw you on the news. I saw that news clip that you posted. What were you doing there?
Basically, there's a defense contractor named Patel. They developed these decontamination Connex boxes where the PPE that everybody's wearing during this time, since there's such a short supply, and the demand is great, but the supply is just not there. They developed this program where basically the N95 masks would be decontaminated, so it extends the life of those. So, again, because the supply is just not there to serve the community. So, one was designated in Fort Worth, and I'm the project lead, so I am the kind of the eyes and ears between the state of Texas and that project and the city of Fort Worth Offices of Emergency Management.
Now, what's the COVID situation down there in Texas and Oklahoma? Is it pretty bad, or are you guys getting hit bad, or is it?
Well, the situation is Oklahoma is kind of in Oklahoma is a very rural state, so there's not a lot of people congregated back, together, and there's not a lot of people, in confined spaces, in close proximity as is in the other states. Oklahoma has about the same amount of COVID positive patients as just the county of Dallas. So the state of Texas is in the tens of thousands. Now, I'd say that situation is probably leveling off. One of the things, though, was the long-term care, nursing homes, assisted living facilities. They're having some problems because people are more close proximity with each other. So the ability to transfer the virus from person to person transmission is a lot higher in those in types of facilities.
Yeah, Mark was telling me that I had Mark on. He's from southeast Oklahoma, and he was having some problems on his property, but he was explaining to me that you don't actually have when you talk about New England, you don't actually talk about the county, you talk about the town, and in Oklahoma, because it's so spread out, you talk about the county. You say, I'm from such and such county, whereas here you say, well, I'm from Clinton, Mass, and he owns 80 acres of land or something. For me, that is a state park. That's
right.
That's a very big area, so there's a lot of social distancing naturally going on down there.
Yeah, naturally, it's definitely a lot of social distancing because there's, unlike what you see up there, out here, basically, you might have maybe 10 people in probably a 7 or 8 mile area, where up there where you may have several hundreds of people in just a city block. So,
right, which brings us to the the topic of conversation, which is why you have so much Bigfoot activity down there, because there's a lot more room for them to go undetected. Now, like I say, you're from the southeast Oklahoma area, but you deal in Arkansas and Texas also. And there seems to be kind of a cluster. I was looking on the map, and where you guys are, and East Texas and Arkansas and stuff, that kind of tri-state. I think it's what do you call that mountain range in Arkansas beside Mena?
Well, you have the Ouachita Mountain Range, you have the Taimichi Mountain Range, and then a little bit further north there, you have the Ozarks. So you have quite a few different mountain ranges that kind of connect that Oklahoma and eastern Oklahoma and western Arkansas.
Yeah, there's a lot of space down there. I noticed that. I mean, I was speaking. I was talking to one of the guys last night. I would love to go down to Oklahoma, maybe for the Honobia Festival, which you're the coordinator for that.
I am one of the organizers for the conference side. It's a festival, so basically you have a conference that goes on inside one of the buildings, and then you have a festival on the outside. Festival being any other type of festival, carnival type. There's food vendors, there's other types of vendors there that sell different types of Bigfoot artifacts, T-shirts, hats, memorabilia, and then we have storytelling. So I organize kind of a portion of the program, which is basically the conference.
Now, how long does that go on for?
It goes on both days. Usually starts around 10 a.m. and goes till about 4:30. And then that gives us enough time to kind of get changed, because I also wear different hats there. I'm also providing other services while that event's going on. And then we get ready for storytelling. Storytelling's usually right around sundown.
And do you have people like for example, what's his name? Dave Gimlin and stuff coming there, or is it pretty low key?
No, our speakers have ranged over the years. I've been organizing it since 2010, and we've had everybody from Dr. Meldrum to Scott Nelson, Ron Moorhead. We've had Lyle Blackburn, Ken Gearhart. We've had some pretty big names there at the conference. MK Davis. There's been a couple of TV shows. Some of their programs kind of went on during one of our conferences. We've tried to get Bob Gimlin, but we just never can get in touch with him. We've tried some others, but it's a busy time of the year. Everybody's doing a conference that time of the year.
Yeah, it's now. What about the residents of, how do I pronounce it? Honobia? Is that how?
Honobia.
Honobia. Okay, so.
Honobia.
So, the residents of that town, are they happy with the festival, or are they kind of like bitter?
Most of them are. It is a time where it brings a little bit of commerce into the community. There's only one little small store there. There's no gas stations in probably 15, 16 miles of the place. Well, the nearest gas station is literally about 18 miles away. It's a time where everybody that has a cabin is rented out, so it's a little bit of a commerce for the area. It does bring a lot of people into that Honobia Valley during that weekend. So, but the rest of the time of the year, it's fairly quiet, and it's a very rural, very sparsely populated area. So,
yeah, I read on the BFRO report. I actually read it last night. And I sent it to my friend back in Ireland, and he read it, and he said he couldn't sleep after it. But one of the investigators said that they were stunned at how rural it was and how much unexplored wilderness, if you like. existed there. So
yeah, most of the area there now, it's kind of changed a little bit since, but majority of the area back then was all federal wildlife management area and national forestry. So there was a lot of areas people couldn't build. People couldn't build a house there. So it is still kind of one of the areas that there's just not a lot of people that live in some of those mountain ranges.
Okay, so now I want to go back. Let's go back to the start. What got you into the whole Sasquatch topic in the first place?
Well, I was working for the federal government, and I was sitting in my office one day, and one of the other guys had asked me. He knew I was from Oklahoma, and he said, "Hey, have you ever seen a Bigfoot?" And I didn't know what he was gonna. I didn't know what he was gonna say or where he was going with it. And I grew up with a lot of the information. I grew up with a lot of the stories and hearing things. And there's some stuff that happened when I was a kid. On a Boy Scout camping trip, and it didn't really interest me. It was more just something you would hear about, and hear people talk. And when he said that there was a group doing an expedition in southeast Oklahoma, that kind of sparked my interest. I thought, And then he was trying to pronounce the location. So I walked into his office, and he was showing me, and I said, "Yeah, that's Honeby, Oklahoma." And the guy looked at me and goes, "You know where that's at?" I said, "I know exactly where it's at, because I had family that lived not too far from there in Tallahena and Smithville, and I used to go through there as a kid." I said, "It ain't nothing but pine trees there." So I reached out to him, and long story short, went on the expedition that following winter, 2014. And, while I was there, the gentleman, the curator of BFRO said, "Hey, you come from law enforcement, you know the area, you know the land, you know where things are at." And I said, "Obviously, you know a little bit about Bigfoot." And he brought me on as an investigator, because at that time, there was no investigators in Oklahoma, Texas, or Arkansas for the BFRO. So I came on as an investigator and eventually started organizing and leading the expeditions up until I left in about 2009.
Now, so is the NOBRO an offshoot of the BFRO?
No. How that happened was when I left, there was a lot of the people that I had recruited, a lot of people that I kind of mentored into the BFRO. They left the same time I did, and I met some other people, and I kind of got involved in some community events and started talking about the stuff that I've done, and ended up kind of drawing into a situation where at that time I was working for the Choctaw Nation. And I had a lot of people asking that, we need to do more of these events, and it started just, doing public speaking. And some of us would go out, someone would tell us about a report or tell us about something, and we would all go out. And then it came down to some of the tribes, some of the locations would say, "Hey, we'd like for y'all to come and speak. What's the name of your group?" And I said, "Well, we don't have a name." So long story short, there was a couple of news channels that did a report, and we were involved, and it just came down to the point that we just thought, we don't have a name. We're all from Oklahoma, and half of us are native, of Indian blood. And I said, well, we'll just call it the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Researchers Organization, and that's how that name was born, because we were going to be involved in some conferences and other stuff. So that's kind of how that name came to be.
Now, why Bigfoot and not Sasquatch? Because I heard that some people don't like to call it Bigfoot because it's too pop culture-y. To me, it's apples and oranges. And a lot of people, refer to the word Bigfoot. Sasquatch obviously is a First Nations, it's a northern native culture name. And, when we're in the public talking, depending on the audience, and I personally use the word Bigfoot because it's just the easiest thing to say, and that's what everybody knows. Right. And
usually if they start wanting to get down into the weeds, getting down deep into the weeds, then we can start utilizing names that most people, may know or may like to hear or understand what the title is and everything. So we just generically refer to, in it in Bigfoot, so it just kind of blanketly covers the entire thing.
So if you're at a Choctaw meeting, you would call it the Champ, is it?
The Champe,
Champe?
that's kind of the older version. There's not a lot of people that use that name anymore. Even though that's in some, cultural references as far as historical names, but a lot of people just refer to just basically the tall people or the forest, the forest people. Sometimes it's referred to as the tall ones, the big people. So it just kind of goes where that audience and where that conversation leads. If I'm giving a topic in a non-native community type town hall or some type of public venue, and I'll just use common terminology, but if I'm in, like for instance, we're at a location where it's a lot of Cherokee, I will tend to use those names that they are familiar with and that they are accustomed to hearing. If I'm out in western Oklahoma, at that Caddo or the Delawares, then, they kind of have their names for them. And we usually refer to in a generic version of just saying the tall people or the tall ones, because that's given the names of the tribes that they use in their language. It usually translates to, the tall people. So we just use, kind of the English version so everybody understands it.
Now, it is in the native cultures. I mean, I've heard that almost every tribe has a name for it. Is it just a given that it exists, or is it still a taboo subject?
In some tribes, it's taboo. In a lot of them, it is, more open. It's open to say. If you get into some spirituality aspects of it, there's a lot of tribes that still tend to lean back on their spiritual culture and their spiritual customs, and sometimes it's not talked about. But in storytelling related to certain tribes, that is still part of some of the storytelling. Now, a lot of people may see, maybe listening to a story and say, oh, I think they're talking about Bigfoot. But in that tribe, they don't view them as how the average person in the world views them, because some tribes refer to them as just somebody that lives over there in the woods. They just see them as a neighbor. They don't look at them as a phenomenal icon, like how, most people in America or everybody around the world sees Bigfoot as a mystery, a phenomenon. To a lot of native cultures, that's just somebody that lives over there, So they don't treat it like a lot of the people do.
And how do they treat it? I mean, most of us, well, you got the tree knockers and the gifters and stuff like that, and I don't really know what's up with that because I have a different opinion. But how do most natives view Bigfoot? I mean, are they fearful? I mean, I've heard
no, they just leave them alone. They live there, they live over there, and we live here. We don't bother them; they don't bother us, and they don't need to tend to go look for them. Now, there are certain times that there are certain people that may live in an area where they may cross paths, or there may be people that own land where the Bigfoot may go from point A to point B and it has to cross their area for whatever reason. And there's sometimes a gentleman, may step out his back door to, do something, and he turns and looks up and there's one sitting across the pasture looking at him because it stopped to see what he was doing. So there's interaction sometimes. But there's about as far as I go in most native cultures and places where there is tribal land, tribal property, and people may live on that property, and the Bigfoots are there, and most of them refer to it as they just they live there and I live here. There's no reason for me to go there, and there's no reason for them to come over here. So they just they don't bother them, and they just look at it as a some people refer to it as an interesting thing, but it's their experience, and that's how their family may have dealt with it for years. There's a lot of people live in some of those tribal areas where they're the second or third generation has lived in that house or on that property, and their grandparents talk about the ones that live in the woods back there. You'll see them, Don't just mind your own business. They'll keep on going. So a great number of people don't see that as a threat, where it becomes a situation where people live in a rural area and they've never had an encounter. They don't know what's going on, and they have something that comes across their backyard. Well, they get fearful. They're afraid because they don't understand that. Well, here's something that's about the size of their, it's, their heads above the eave of the porch, and this is a huge, individual, and they get fearful. So it's sometimes not uncommon for people to be afraid because they do not know how this is going to end up. They don't know how this is the outcome of it, because they've never had this happen to them before. So the fear is automatically there. But people that live in a situation where they see them maybe once, twice a year, been seeing them for several years, they don't bother them. So their feelings about the situation is completely different than somebody else that may have a first time encounter that is unaware of, that they're not harmful, that they're not going to be aggressive. As long as you're not aggressive, they're not going to be. But sometimes people don't feel that way because they don't understand the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just while you're saying it, I'm thinking, if your child goes off walking into the woods, are you saying that there's not a threat there, that something could happen to your child or something, or?
Well, that is a situation where it's very delicate, because I have, over the years I've been doing this, I have heard of reports. I have talked to law enforcement people that were involved in certain situations. There's been 3 different situations that I know of, 2 in Texas, 1 in Oklahoma, where a child was lost in the woods, and they were found near a road or near a parking area, and the child explains that they were walked out of the woods. They were brought out of the deep, they were down in the woods, lost, and a bear came to them and showed them how to get out of the area. So
wow.
There are certain descriptions that refer to, and you just if you just want to go ahead and put it on the table and say that there's been 3 different occasions where a child was lost. All three of the children were basically under the age of 10. So I think one child was like 11, but the other 2 were under the age of 10. They were very well knowledgeable that to them it was a bear that walked them out of the woods, because it was very big, it was very hairy. But the only problem is it walked upright like a man.
Yeah, we just had a situation like that about 6 months ago, didn't we? Like Kentucky or something.
I believe so.
Somewhere down there.
I have yet to take a report. I have yet to know any substantial report or incident where a child went off into the woods and they were never found again, and Bigfoot was supposedly the suspect in that incident. A lot of times, there's more things out there in the woods, to me, that would be more dangerous to that child than a Bigfoot. A Bigfoot, it is believed that the reason why the Bigfoot probably showed the kid how to get out was, think about this. If you are the Bigfoot and you live in those woods and you have your own family, you have children, you live back in those deep, hollow areas of the woods, and a child's back in there, who is coming to look for that child? People on horses, people with dogs, helicopters, search teams, all that is coming into your woods looking for that child. So it is believed that the Bigfoot, understanding the situation, says, you know what, you better take your kid back, because I don't want y'all off here in the woods looking for him. Here's your kid back. Because that now puts them in jeopardy, because, again, what is going to come looking for that child?
Huh.
Everybody's coming looking for that child. Helicopters, people on horses, search dogs. So it is believed that they are not returned, they were never taken, but that they were showed the way out merely, or at the same time, maybe there's compassion there. This is a child, Who knows? Really, honestly, who knows? But the stories are still there. What reason does a child have to make up that a bear showed them how to get out of the woods?
That's very encouraging, because I watched that movie last night, Willow Creek. Have you seen it?
No, honestly, I and this is nothing bad to the people that make movies about Bigfoot and stuff, but I've tried to watch a few of them, and that's not it. I just got frustrated. In every show and every movie I go to see, it's just, or not go to see, but I hear about and start watching a trailer on it. That's not what really happens. So it's very aggravating that sometimes things are portrayed in a way that just it's untrue. So I've kind of lost interest.
Well, that's good to know.
Watching.
Yeah, that's good to know, because there is there's kind of a divide in the Bigfoot community. Some people say they're nice and some people say they're aggressive, and it's nice to hear that you have experience with it, and you're you tend to view them as more compassionate than others. I mean,
now, well, there are times, there are certain situations that I have investigated, our team, our organization has investigated. But when we find out the aggressive, now there are aggressive ones. That's common, like anything else. But me personally, all the investigations I've ever done where one may be aggressive, when we completed the investigation, when we did all the interviews, we looked at everything. We took a couple weeks, and came back and talked to them again. Their stories hadn't changed. What we find out is it's the person that lived at that property caused the situation where the Bigfoot became aggressive. It was the human that actually created that situation where it caused the Bigfoot to act that way. So, or to behave in that manner, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Out of fear. I mean, I can see. Well, I know you don't want to go into the siege of Hanobi, but I mean, I can see why those guys would have been scared with the family there and stuff. And there's these creatures that are huge, and you don't know what their intentions are, so you don't know what to do. Right.
That the incident in Hanobi, what referred to as a Hanobi siege, was just a tragic incident that just it ended the way it did. Not speaking anything bad about how Mr. Humphrey handled it. He only did what he thought that should be done to protect his family. But I know a lot of people that lived in Hanobi. And I've known a lot of people that lived there when that incident occurred. And I had a chance, an opportunity to talk to the truck driver, years and years later. But, the native people basically, and this is really nothing bad about Mr. Humphrey. And how to try to explain it where it's being respectful.
Well, first of all, who's the truck driver? You mentioned that before.
There was a truck driver coming up the road, and I know it's kind of hard because you've never been there, so I'm trying to figure out how you explain it. The road that Mr. Humphrey's family lived on, that road runs east and west. It's called Highway 144. The road the truck driver was coming up is Indian Trail Highway. That road runs north and east. That road would be back to the west of the Humphreys property. Well, it was several hours later that truck driver was coming up the road, and his headlights. He was at nighttime. He was driving an international or a truck. I can't remember what it is. It has the emblem on the front, the bulldog emblem, and something was coming out of the woods, coming up off. This is a mountain road, so there's a ditch. Not really a ditch. There's almost like a drop off to the right, and you have the mountain to your left as he's going northbound. Well, something comes out of that from the right hand side, starts to cross the road in front of his truck. As he's slowing down, his headlights are now illuminating. What he describes is he never says the word Bigfoot, but he describes as one of it was carrying another one of it over its shoulder, and the one that was over the shoulder appeared to be lifeless. because the arms and the body was just swaying as it was walking, that apparently it was dead. It continued on in front of his vehicle and disappeared off into the tree line on the left-hand side of the road. So it was coming from right to left, which would have been the direction that it would have been coming from when the incident occurred at the Humphreys residence. When they shot, it went across that road, which would have been to the south, and up into the mountain. And then as time went on, then one of them carried off the dead back to the west through the mountains, which then went across that road right from the truck driver.
Wow. Huh.
So, in hindsight, again, you don't ever want to quarterback, second Saturday night quarterback the incident, or armchair researchers, wherever however people want to describe it. Mr. Humphrey did what he thought was right, and that's nothing against that. But if it would have been someone that lived in a situation where they may have known the Bigfoot in a different way, nothing against him again, no disrespect to Mr. Humphrey, but if somebody were to live in the house that knew anything about the customs and some of the protocols it is in dealing with something like that, it may have come out a different story. Because one of the things that I learned a long time ago is, if they're coming around and, you're not going to be able to keep them from coming. That's just one thing. I mean, it's their property too. They're going to come and go as they please. But for you to have some sort of peaceful interaction or some type of halfway point of, hey, you stay over there and I'll stay over here. But during that time, the winters were really harsh, and most everybody harvests during the year because, the mountains are kind of hard to drive when it's icy to go to the store. So everybody just, shoots their own deer. Well, obviously it was pretty rough for the Bigfoot too, because here's fresh deer killed, quartered, and in a position that they could take it as free will. The situation, if there was I don't know what the word I'm trying to find, but if Mr. Humphreys would have probably shared that opportunity to share that more openly, the outcome, may have been different. But again, that's either here or there because of the fact of what happened. Mr. Humphrey did what he thought was right.
So you think if he had maybe quartered a deer and left it on the edge of his property, it might have, calmed the situation down, kind of stopped them from coming onto his property, that kind of thing?
It is. Well, I don't know if it would stop him coming on the property, but the outcome may have been a little different. I have had half a dozen situations where I've had property owners, people that have land, a hunting lease, and down in southern Oklahoma, down by the Red River, and then up in southeast Oklahoma, and saying, hey, I have my cousins and their friends that come over here to deer hunt, and they just get driven out of the woods. They're getting chased out of the woods by something. Well, if you go back to Native culture and you go back to some of the things that the elders have shared, and you can take it for what it is. And I shared this one gentleman that had property and said, we have some of the greatest turkey hunting, but we can't. Nobody wants to go down in there because it's just they get getting ran out. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you go down there, and when you see something, a turkey, a deer or something, you shoot two. Now, is that against the law? However you want to see it. But the idea is if you shoot two, you leave one and you take one. Leaving one is an offer of respect to basically say, hey, we would like to hunt here too, so I'm going to leave you something out of gratitude by leaving us alone, allowing us to hunt. And as far as I know, to this day, there's been no problems at some of these properties that we've kind of shared that knowledge with.
Man, that's very that's very good information, and I haven't heard that before. But that's awesome. I mean, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, where I live, it's in Massachusetts, and we're in a busy town and stuff, and we don't have we have wilderness, but I think the nearest wilderness we have that they have been spotted in is the Quabbin Reservoir, and they've been spotted. Like, there's been a couple of road crossings and stuff, but that place is pretty dense. So, what about your own experiences, Troy? Have you actually came face to face with Sasquatch?
On multiple occasions, yes.
Really? So you've seen this creature?
I have seen them in Texas. I had a long-term investigation at a property. Some people refer to as a habituation site, which that's just a common terminology. Had the ability to, I got to know the people that lived at the property, became really good friends with them, and just had the opportunity, because it was not very far from where I lived, to go over to the property on weekends. So I gained a lot of experience and a lot of learning about their demeanor. And I have seen the females. I've seen the father. I've seen two of the teenage ones. And in Oklahoma, over in the Honabi Valley, we offer a lot of expeditions throughout the years. And through all these years, I've had multiple encounters. I don't want to say encounters, but multiple sightings, multiple, however you want to describe it. And did a couple of expeditions in Arkansas, and we did some projects in Kentucky, and have seen them there, mainly at night in Kentucky, but didn't get to see one in the daytime. But we saw them stand up on the hill. So it would be kind of hard to try to. You'd have to ask, a specific question for me to answer, because and there is a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have. I have a lot of people that come with us. We have our own investigative team. We have a lot of guys that come and help provide guides on these expeditions. So they have seen just as much as I've seen. So there's a lot of people that have seen them way more than once.
Now, you've seen these things. What do they look like? I mean, what does their face look like? I know they're 8 foot tall and they're hairy and stuff, but I mean, when you look at them, how do they look? I've heard people saying they're a cross between a gorilla and a human. What did you see?
I have never seen the gorilla-looking face. The ones in Texas, the female, she looked very Anglo. I mean, she looked like a woman.
No way.
Her skin was black, jet as night. She had a pointy nose, a very, like an Anglo-shaped face. I mean, she looked very, if she was standing on the side of the road and you passed her, you'd be thinking, why is there a lady standing there naked in the middle of the road?
Sounds like me.
The males, just some of them have the one in Honabi that I see quite often that we think is the father, the alpha male, as some people refer to it as. He's very stoic in the face. He's very, kind of leathery almost type face. Very worn. You can tell he's old. You can tell he's been around. Did an investigation in East Texas where some kids saw one cross the road from it in the daytime, and it was all white. It had a Fu Manchu, and it looked like an old man walking across the road, except he just was covered in hair. He was even bent over and walking like he was arthritic. And there's been some sightings of something similar to that in southwest Oklahoma, of a white one that walked kind of hunched over and had a Fu Manchu, and just was big and didn't move very fast. So they're like us. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of their faces are all hair, and some of the faces are human-like. I have yet to see one that had an ape-style face. And I know they're out there because I hear the reports and see the reports. But I just personally have never seen one that had that type of a look to the face.
Man, that is so fascinating. That's why I think that's why people get so scared, because they kind of look human, but they're not. I think that's what unsettles most people.
I've taken several reports. I've investigated quite a few. I had a gentleman, I haven't talked to him in many years. I think he's moved on out of Texas. He was a Green Beret. I checked him out before I went to talk to him just to make sure, because a lot of people always say there's something and sometimes they're not.
Stolen valor.
But this gentleman was truly a Green Beret. He did several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he had a long story short, he had an encounter on his property where he had saw something, and when he raised his rifle and he looked through the scope and he saw something in the scope, because who he saw was not that far away. He was having some problems judging the distance because of the sound, and the forest was thick. It was very thick foliage. When he raised his rifle, all he could see was some reddish through his scope because the object was too close. It was closer to him than what he thought. So he brought the rifle down and looked up and realized it was only standing, literally it was only standing probably about, 60 yards.
Right.
And he looked it right in the face. And what he described, and when he was describing this, now this had been almost 5 or 6 months later, the description and how he had to try to compose himself multiple times to speak of what he saw was a testimony of the fact that this really bothered him, because if you remember, or if you think what a Green Beret, how they're trained, what their mentality is, not only of how they're trained and their mentality, but he's also a combat veteran. So he has seen things that probably would disturb the average person. He has faced things. He has faced fear. He has faced that adrenaline dump. And I've been in law enforcement. I've been in the situation, so I understand that adrenaline dump. I understand what it does to you, what it does to your eyesight, and what it does to your blood pressure, what it does to your emotions. He's looked at something that he realized that the rifle that he's carrying, if I remember right, I think he had a 30-06, if I recall. He's fully armed. He has been in the most, world's horriblest conditions, and he's looking at something that he realized that he has no defense against. And it's 60 yards away, and he knows by the look on this face of this Bigfoot, it can cover that ground before he could ever make a decision what he wants to do. And he is realizing that how he was trained, how he was taught, when he's in the woods, he is the alpha male because of his training, his experience. He controls that environment. Now he's facing with something that has something that's more than him. He's now realized that this, what he's looking at, has control of its environment. And he has no control over it. The look he got from it in a nonverbal type of communication was that this, as he described it, he goes, this thing could do whatever it want with me, and I had no way to defend myself. That caused him some sleepless nights. It caused him not wanting to go out into the woods in the back part of his property. He wouldn't go out in the woods. He wouldn't go out of his house after dark. So people having those type of encounters, you're brought up in the world that you watch TV and you hear this every now and then about Bigfoot, and you always hear the little jokes and hear the little in your windows. You are a Green Beret. You're trained to the highest level that most military forces are trained at. You are a combat veteran, and now you're coming to face with something that you are led to believe does not exist, is a hoax, and you're standing here face to face with it, and it gives you the impression that whatever that training you've had and all that experience you had didn't mean nothing because this could do whatever it wanted with you. So that played on his mind. That played in his mind to the fact that he thought he knew the world, and now he's found something or discovered something that have taken and shaken his entire foundation of how the world is as he sees it or he believes it.
Well, how did that whole situation play out? What happened?
I was still working for the government then, so I was going to San Antonio quite often, and I would stop by to visit with him, and that was back in the 2008 2009 time frame. And when I left the government, I started working in Oklahoma for the Choctaw Nation, and I kind of lost track of him. And about 5 years ago, somebody was asking me about that story, and I was telling it, and I tried to reach out to him, his email and his phone number. doesn't. I mean, his phone number don't work anymore, and his email. I just haven't heard nothing. So I don't know if he's moved on or what. But what I do know is he doesn't live in the house he did then. So.
Well, I mean, what that night that he lowered his rifle? I mean, what happened after that? Did he tell you?
He stood there, and he said it was probably about a 6 or 7 second. As in his opinion, it was about a 6 or 7 minute standoff of like who's going to do what. He remained frozen, and when it turned and kind of went off into the trees and kind of disappeared off into the foliage, once he gained his composure, when he went to move, he when he went down to look at his rifle, he realized that his safety was off, but his finger was on the trigger, but he couldn't move his hand because his hand was like, he said his hand was like frozen. He couldn't get his hand off the rifle because he just was, he said I was terrified. I was terrified. He said, I don't think I probably could have pulled the trigger if it came at me, because he was in complete awe of the whole situation.
Man, have you ever heard Mike Wooley's encounter?
Who is it?
Mike Wooley. He was the hunter, and it was on Sasquatch Chronicles, and he was a hunter in Louisiana, and he came across a Bigfoot, and he raised his rifle and he looked at it, and he saw that it was real, and he said it looked like, the way he described it to some of the Native Americans that he knew, the way he described it, they said it was, it had a Cherokee, it looked like a Cherokee, and he couldn't pull the trigger, but this thing went crazy as soon as he pulled his scope up, and they chased him out of the woods. Now, they could have got him, I think, if they wanted, but he got out of there, and Mike Wooley died a couple of years ago, but his encounter was one of my favorite encounters, because just the way he told it, and you could tell that this guy was, it really happened, he was telling a story that was true, and I think that he, I think that he assisted in a movie, I can't remember the name of it now. I'm having a brain fart, but yeah, so you think that these things are, you think that they're people. You were telling me you think they're people.
I think, I don't think all of them are the same. There's different, they're just like us. I think there's some that are very remote, that live in areas that do not want to be around people. They will run you out of the area. They are more wild. They're more uncivilized. Now, I don't want to use the word uncivilized. I don't want to make it sound like that, but they're just not as friendly, and they're just not as patient with people. And then there's the ones that live in and around these areas where people see them cross property and stuff, and they have a different way about them. I mean, our expeditions, there's a place that we go, and we've been going for years, and they always show up. And there's sometimes some expeditions, we have everybody in the expedition gets to have something happen. They're over there whistling, they're over there throwing things, they're over there running back and forth between a trail. I mean, there's those types of interactions. It's very pleasant. It's, some people get a kick out of it. And I think they probably get a kick out of it too, because they're in there running around and doing things. So, they have a language, but there's a lot of them that I've heard, and in my own experience in some places that we were way back up in there, and they probably did not want us there, but they did not speak the stuff that we normally hear them speak. They were throwing things and hooting and hollering and screaming, but there are some that have a language. We've recorded it. We've heard them. I've heard it with my naked ear. We stood right there with almost 8 people, and 2 of them were having a conversation back and forth between each other. And everybody just sitting there with their mouths dropped. And everybody's about, halfway into it, everybody goes, hey, somebody ought to be recording this.
Was it like the Sierra? Was it like the Sierra signs? That kind of language?
Kinda, yes, kinda. But sometimes, the language it's a language. You can hear them. They're just. I'll demonstrate, but this is not what they. It's not their words, but it's basically a. You can hear the other one speak.
Yeah,
you
the gibberish people call it.
Two different voices.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lady in California that went to the beach one day, and she watched them in the water throwing seaweed at each other. That was on Sasquatch Chronicles too. I don't know what your opinion is of that podcast, but this lady was from England, and she was on a kind of a business trip, and she said that the language they were speaking was exactly the same as the Sierra sounds. If anybody wants to go on Google the Sierra sounds, they'll know what I'm talking about. But so do they have different language in different areas of America, or is it geographical?
I believe so, because I've heard them speak at the location there in Texas, and I was there at that property enough, and we've had some of the recordings from there, and they have it's almost like a different dialect, because if you were to play a different audio clip, and some of them belong to some of our investigators. If one guy played an audio clip and then the other guy played an audio clip, I could tell you which one was from Oklahoma, which one was from Texas, because they have a different sound to them, and we have shared that with Scott Nelson, and Scott Nelson, has even told me himself. He says, "Yeah, it's quite obvious. We have dialects, and it's why not they have dialects." Now, what's interesting is we have played around. Some people think it's, we go too far. We try to use, native words, Choctaw words, the Ponca words and stuff. So sometimes we get reactions and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have had the words repeated back. Now, is that to say that they're actually responding, or are they just mimicking what we're saying? So, in some of the cultures, like some of my friends up north with the Ponca tribe, they tell me that their grandparents and some of the tribe said that they used to speak to them in Ponca. But this has been many years ago. And come to find out, even on my own side of the family, I have a Cherokee side of the family, and I'm learning from my cousins that that his parents and grandparents and stuff, they have a powwow stomp grounds here in Oklahoma, and apparently there was some talk that many years ago that they would be able to speak Cherokee, and they would reply back. So there's historical information that people were able to use their own language, like the Cherokee language or the Lakota Sioux or the Ponca Choctaw, and speak to the Bigfoot. But those are the stories and legends and some of the culture aspect of it.
Now, you work closely with the government and stuff. You have a government position, correct?
Yes.
Now, do you think that I've heard this conspiracy thrown around that there's some kind of government cover up, and then they know that they exist, but they cover it up for whatever reason? Is this, how accurate is that? I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
I would say I have been, I work for the federal government. I've been in and around things. I've never been in any top secret things that's related to that. I've never been anywhere near that stuff.
Right.
But I've been around in some projects. I've been around in some things, and I do know the mindset of how the government works. Now, back in the days, I'd always wondered, why would they hide this? Why would they cover it up? But knowing what I know now, and knowing how the general public reacts to things, I am glad that they keep things quiet, because the public, not everybody, but there's a great general population of the public that acts like a bunch of knuckleheads when stuff goes on. And think about it. Think of the Boggy Creek, Boggy Creek monster in Fouke, Arkansas.
Right.
What did the townspeople do? Because the girls at that house told the sheriff What'd they do? They formed a posse with rifles and guns and dogs. What'd they do? They went out hunting for it. It'd be worse today. It'd be way worse today. If you were to have that same type of encounter, you would have and then I will say this because I am also a redneck, from where I live. You would have every redneck that does not understand the situation. You'd have every gun-toting person out there in the woods chasing something down. So, does the government know? I'm pretty dang sure they know. And why do they keep it secret? Well, here's how I interpret it. If you had something, if you know of something that is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet tall, that's pretty much unstoppable with just the average person with a rifle or even inside their car, and you were to understand that there's probably thousands of these across the country, and if you were to start telling the world that these are living right in your own backyard, there is no telling how people would react. One, you'd have those people that want to shoot one out there running around at night, shooting at everything that they thought was 10 feet tall and black or dark or brown or whatever. So they're misidentifying something and just shooting at it. So we have already had people out in the woods shooting things and end up shooting each other over a Bigfoot. I mean, people, and I will say this because I've been in law enforcement. We just have too many people that does not use the left side of their brain to be mature enough to act in an adult manner. So I understand why the government keeps things, and well, maybe there's I don't know. We don't have enough people in our world that will behave properly. Yeah. So I can understand why you want to keep it quiet.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I can understand that. Now, have you seen the? There's a recent video that came out from the Iceman. He calls himself the Iceman. Have you seen that YouTube channel?
No.
Well, he was on I think he's a bow hunter, but he recorded some screams. It'd be easier to describe if you'd actually seen it, but he recorded these screams, and I'm going to have him on the show next week, actually. And, well, he's primarily a bow hunter, but he had a couple of encounters, and he recorded these screams in Georgia. And people are telling me it's a wolf or a big cat and stuff, but the lungs on this thing is just it's like half a mile away, and it's overpowering, and I don't know what else it could be. I've tried to scour the internet to find out what this sound is, but there's nothing comes close to
it. How I tell people, and we do investigations. We have a team. We have investigators all over Oklahoma, and we've even initiated a formal training program that when people want to join our organization, that they'll go through a training program and be assigned to one of our other investigators that's experienced, and he's kind of like a mentor and a field training officer type thing that basically teaches how to do interviews, investigations, photography, evidence collection, the whole 9 yards. And one of the things that we share is there's two factors here. If you were not standing there when that noise was made, and you were not standing at the location of where it came from to identify what made that sound, scientifically you cannot prove what made that sound. You can't even prove a wolf made the sound. You can't, because you're not there where that sound's being emitted from. So you have speculation, conjecture, and just a simple wild guess. But there is another factor. You've been in the woods long enough. You've heard the Bigfoot screams, and you've heard a wolf and a coyote. It's really sometimes hard to discern between the two, but if you've seen or if you've heard the Bigfoot and you've been in close proximity and you can verify that upright dangle there made that noise, and you hear it again and you hear it again and you hear it again, that gives you substantial evidence to realize that if you hear it again, you can pretty much have a greater percentage to identify to say, you know what, I really think it was probably that because I've heard that too many times. coyotes just make a huge range of vocalization. It's really hard to try to discern when you're hearing these screams and stuff. But if you hear something a mile away that's just overpowering, I can't find a wolf. A wolf can overpower vocalizations to other animals, but at a mile and a half away and it's just vibrating in your chest, that sounds like one thing to me.
Right. Now, so like you say, you work closely with the government and stuff, and how do your peers view all of this stuff? I mean, do you talk openly about this, and how do they?
I don't talk openly. If I'm asked about it, I'll give maybe one or two short answers, but I just kind of explain to them that is what I do outside of work. And, if they're interested, then, we can talk about it. But I separate that in my job, because I don't, I'm not in the law enforcement aspect anymore as far as having to testify in the court. Because, I as a police officer and a federal officer, I've had many opportunities to have to be in court. So I was very, very, very careful of that, because that can be used against me as an expert witness if I'm testifying. But I don't do that anymore. So I'm not as worried about it. But one thing, though, that I have to be careful with, because a lot of this sometimes is my credibility, because I'm also in positions of authority and positions of decision-making at senior levels of dealing with disasters and incidents. And the hat I'm wearing at that moment, a lot of people rely on my credibility and my ability to make certain decisions. And, this topic could be brought up, but most likely now, just about everybody knows I'm in this, and everybody knows me personally, and they know the key of it is I separate it. I separate what I do at work and what I do at this, completely separated. But it also tends to give me a little bit of credibility, because most people know who I am, and when they say, "Hey, we have a thing situation here, and we're probably going to call Troy about it, because Troy can, I have the ability to have confidentiality and work in complete candor about the whole thing, because we deal a lot of times with sheriff's office, or somebody will call us. And we just don't go blabbing around. We just don't go run around off to the news and say, "Hey, the sheriff's office called about this incident," like at Mark's. Right. Well, that's the situation where a lot of these other organizations tend to look at us differently, because, we get reports and we do things more in a way that a lot of other people are trying to figure out how we have the ability to go in and be in the places we are, because some organizations try forever to try to get onto the Indian reservation, and here we are just walking around it. Well, those are the relationships that I've built, and my friendship and my personal relationships with some of these tribes and some of the people in those tribes, and my own credibility and my reputation, that kind of all feeds together.
So you have to have some kind of in with the tribes before they'll even speak to you, and obviously you have you've got deep ties to the Choctaw and the Cherokee, so that's how you get in there. I mean,
well, one of the things that here's how it really happened, that it just kind of flowered like a spring. A spring flower. Basically, many years ago, it's probably been about 12, 13 years ago, actually longer than that, I had the opportunity to go and meet a Caddo tribal elder and talk to him about some stuff, because I had some reports and I had some questions, and we had some stuff going on about the historical aspect of the Caddo Indians, because the Caddo Indians were in southeast Oklahoma way before the Choctaws ever were. So I had a lot of questions, and somebody introduced me that you need to go speak to this elder. But remember your protocol. Remember what you're supposed to do. I said, yes, I do. By me following traditional protocol, when you go to an elder, you go with something presentation. You go with something as an offering of respect. You just don't go into some place and start asking questions and expect an answer. You go in with a bag of tobacco or a basket of fruit or some bread or something. You're going in with respect that you're doing something to present to that elder, because they are going to be giving you information that they have held on to for many years, and they just don't freely let that information out. But by me doing that one act, by me following that protocol and following the protocol to a T, that elder introduced me to 2 other elders. And then those 2 other elders introduced me to 3 other elders at another tribe. And then those elders introduced me to another tribe of elders. So it just blossomed because I followed protocol, and I continue to follow protocol, and I continue to follow the respect and the cultural diversity that each tribe's differently, and they have their own customs. I took the time to learn those and even learn a little bit of the language to present myself in a respectful way. So basically, by me doing that one, generous act of following their protocols and the customs, just exploded into what I have now.
Now, how many guys are in your organization right now?
We have 10. We have 10 investigators, and we're probably going to have quite a few more coming in, and that's why we've developed a kind of a training curriculum, because we obviously operate in tribal communities. Sometimes we are in front of council members. Sometimes we are speaking to key leadership, key prominent figures, even in non-tribal communities. Sometimes we may be talking with a sheriff, or we may be talking to the news. We may be talking to a news channel. So what we represent is, we try to be professional. We try to speak intelligently. We try to use physical evidence and substantial evidence, as well as still understanding the tribal. We can walk in both worlds. We can walk in that scientific world of physical collection of evidence for interpretation or testing or whatever, but we can also walk in that tribal community where there's a lot of spirituality, where there's a lot of phenomenon which belongs to the paranormal and stuff. So we have the ability to walk in those. But it's the key of our investigators that go out to do these investigations. I mean, if you were to get visited by a couple of our investigators, they're going to be polite. They're going to be just the same as if a police detective came to your house. I mean, they're going to look at things objectively and then subjectively. They're going to have whatever the landowner wants done. If the landowner is wanting to know what's going on, our guys will do what they can to find out. If they just want a report done, that's what they will do. They will collect that information and see if there's any evidence, and finish the report and put it in our database. If, like in Mark's case and some of these other cases that are popping up, that people are afraid. They don't know what's going on. They don't know why these Bigfoots are coming into their yard or coming up to their house. So those become a little bit more complex investigations. So with all that being said, we have some of our other investigators that actually come from law enforcement. So, we are developing some programs so that way when people want to join our organization, that because of the nature of who and what we're around and the communities around, we want to make sure that we have the right type of investigator that's just not somebody out there just running around, just coming up with some strange stuff and, representing us in a bad way. So, we're trying to take a little bit more of a formal approach to our investigators and what they do out there in the field. So,
I know we're running out of time, but can you speak of the casino footage a little bit? I know Dave Wilbanks I had on the show a few weeks ago. He's just written a book and released it on Amazon. Champé, is it? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Champé or Champy. Yeah, Champy? It just kind of depends on. It depends on what part of Oklahoma you're from, but it is the Choctaw. That's what they say.
It's a Choctaw word. So he actually saw that footage. Now, it was pretty definitive from what I hear.
It was. When the investigation was occurring back then, a lady that worked at the casino had wrote into the BFRO, and I took the report and spoke with her, and she saw the video, and she worked there at the time, and she had a lot of the good information because she was, that's her tribe, the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, and she had a lot of inside knowledge. Her father was an elder, is an elder, and there was a lot of inside information to that part too, because, one of the things that this was a situation that became a media, that's how the BFRO got a big wind of it, was because it made its way onto the news. And actually Roger Roberts was the BFRO investigator then that had initially investigated it. I didn't know David Wilbanks was involved. I guess I never came across his name during that time.
He saw the footage, yeah. That's
interesting. It's real interesting. I why we never crossed paths, but I guess it is what it is. But yeah, the footage is very it's very clear. It's very clear on what it was. When people show videos, or people will send me clips, if you've ever seen a Bigfoot move, if you've ever seen them walk across a field or walk across the road or just move in the way they move, when you look at a video, you can watch a video in about 2 seconds, realize if it's fake or not, because they move with intention. They move with every step they take, and every movement of the body is choreographed. It's very fluid. It's like they mean to do what they're doing. When someone is wearing a suit or wearing some type of outfit that tries to portray that they're a Bigfoot, it's clumsy because they're wearing something they don't normally wear. So Bigfoot wear what they wear all day long for all their lives, so they can move with grace. They can move with speed and fluid, and some people refer to it as like a ballerina. Every movement is choreographed. Well, a person in a suit is going to be clumsy. He's got to look where he's going because that's something he don't normally wear. It's clumsy and it's not suited to him, and it's so this is quite obviously definitely something, because it's also kind of hard to try to find somebody that's probably over 10 feet tall. Then when they're walking, they have to duck under a vapor light and do it fluidly, as if you and I were just walking and you just ducked under a tree branch. So it was quite obvious that it was definitely the real thing.
Now, what about Patty? What's your view on Patty?
Oh, it's real. Again, watch how she moves. Could you, if you were a person, and let's say, just for the sake of argument, you had the Hollywood version of being able to do the makeup, the outfit, the costume, you're walking across an uneven terrain. Would you be able to turn your upper body and look back behind you and continue to walk that way without tripping, falling, or even stubbing, or even altering your movement?
Yeah.
She is walking across there like that. I mean, that's her. She whoever that is walks in that body from birth, because whoever's walking across there is turning their upper body to turn and look back and continue to walk forward on uneven ground and not stub their toe or fall or trip or even alter their pace.
Yeah, one thing that got me is about Patty was there was one frame where she turned around and looked at the camera, and you can see in its eyes that this was not. You can just tell that this was not someone in a suit. There was a presence in the eyes, and I don't know, but I mean, many people think that it's a suit, but that's usually people that haven't really looked into it or aren't just interested in it, So.
People say it all the time, people talk about it, and I've just learned to that's them.
Yeah.
But the problem is those people have never spent countless hours in the woods at night under austere conditions without a flashlight and in an area where no ambient light can penetrate the canopy, no moon, and have something standing, 12 to 14 feet away illuminate its eyes, and you can see the shape and the outline of the body, and within minutes it can be completely, you can't see it no more. So people that want to judge something that they think is fake, that they think is in a suit, they can do that all day long. They have perfect right to sit there and contradict everything that's out there. But unless they are one of these witnesses that has had those type of encounters, I can guarantee you the people that have had these close encounters, such as that gentleman that was down there in South Central Texas, I mean, you're not going to, you're never going to win an argument with them because they saw it. They know exactly what they saw.
Now, one more thing before we close it out. You mentioned that there are other things out there and things that you can't speak of. Now, can you literally not speak of them? Like you're talking like demonic presence. There's an aspect of what we do in our public education and our public speaking and speaking engagements and events. Just like going to church, you don't want to talk about the devil, but you've got to talk about the devil because you've got to know your enemy. You've got to learn about your enemy. You've got to know about who you're facing. But when it comes to the paranormal folklore, supernatural folklore of all these other things that are out there running around, most Native tribes don't speak of it because, again, you're giving it power. You're speaking it into the universe. You're putting power. Your words are going out in there, and you're speaking of it. So that's what it referred to as basically you don't want to speak of it. It's taboo. But we have to speak about it sometimes because you got to learn about it because that is an evil thing. That is a real thing, but you need to know things about it in case you've ever have that type of an encounter. The discernment between, some people refer to, maybe it was a Bigfoot or maybe it was, the DOGMAN, the DM. It's quite obvious what they are because one does not look like the other, but in a flash, if you're sitting in a tree stand and all of a sudden something black and hairy goes flying by you, you may not know what it is. But there's a lot of people that report in a lot of these encounters. Sometimes there's a presence that they feel. There's some people it feels that that there's a pleasant feeling. That it's not harmful. I have a very pleasant feel about it. But then there are some people that said that this was so full of dread, they were so full of hate, and they couldn't stand to be in there no more. So there's discernment about some of it as well, and a spiritual discernment to it. But there are so many encounters and other things that we get reports of. There are things that, there's also been reports. There's been sightings of what they refer to as the goat man. We've even had a few sightings in southern Oklahoma. I've never done any investigations, but I hear the stories, and sometimes they come from a non-native witness, but some of them do. There's some tribes that have land, southwest Oklahoma, out by Mount Scott, that there are some strange beings that people see. And a lot of people would pretty much say, it ain't a Bigfoot. It's not of this world, and they're not talking aliens. They're talking something's there that's not from this earth. So different tribes have different cultures and different, supernatural stories. Up north they have the Wendigo. Down here in the south and southwest and in Arizona, New Mexico, and the Arapaho tribes, the shapeshifters are very prominent. And there's even reports, even northeast Oklahoma about some shapeshifters that I've heard from, some of the people who live up to the northeast. So they're just not as prominent in as far as compared to the Bigfoot reports, but they are there. Well, Troy, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and
I enjoyed it.
Oh, it was great. You've blown me away with some of your information, and hopefully I'll have you on again at some point.
Oh yeah, just anytime.
It was great to have you, and I'm sure
I appreciate it.
There's a lot of people dying to hear this interview, and you're very credible, and you've got a lot of good information, and once again I thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right, Troy. Well, I will keep in touch, and thank you.
Yep.
Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye now.